Everybody, and welcome to Summits with a Purpose in Conversation with Alex Staniforth. This is the 20th episode, and I'm so excited to have a young man, really young man, doing amazing things out there. We all have excuses, and I'm sure he would have lots of excuses not to do the amazing work that he's doing, but he's not. He's putting himself out there, doing a lot of amazing work for mental health. Let's hear it from Alex. Alex, welcome, and thank you for gracing us with your presence and for agreeing to share your story. Tell us a little bit about who Alex is.
Sure, yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. So, in a nutshell, I'm an adventurer, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, and I recently founded a charity, Mind Over Mountains, as well. And my journey in life so far has all been about to use, the outdoor challenges as a way of overcoming my own personal challenges in life. And now I'm very fortunate that I can share those challenges and share this journey, as a speaker, as an author, to try and inspire people to face their challenges in life. It didn't always start that way. I was never naturally sporty or into the outdoors. I found it by chance when I was about 14 years old. So I'm 25 now, so not that long ago. And ever since then, the outdoors became my way to fight back, to overcome, the epilepsy, the stammering and the bullying I had at school, and started to question all those doubts and those limits I had in my head. And I never imagined, that would lead me to where I am today, and constantly looking for that next challenge and always finding a way through those setbacks in life, really.
Wow. I think bullying is quite a big thing, and I'm so excited to talk to you because I know there are a lot of other kids that are facing that at school. To be able to see somebody that's come through that and epilepsy, which I didn't know about, and be able to do such amazing stuff is such an inspiration. I applaud you for that. Why mental health? You are a big advocate for mental illness and mental health. Why is it so important to you?
I think because it's probably the biggest challenge that I've faced. I mean, for probably, I think seriously for 8 or 9 years, I've suffered with, bouts of anxiety and depression and an eating disorder. And I think that for me has been incredibly difficult to overcome. And I think it's still an ongoing challenge. It's not something that you cure. And despite this, I've still been able to, people would say I've achieved some big things in the outdoors, and I'm really keen to show that actually mental illness is no barrier to achievement, and it can affect anybody, even people who may appear to be mentally tough and mentally strong through the challenges that we are doing. But I think for me, the outdoors and being active has been, the best medication that I've tried for mental ill health. And, I felt very, very glad that I've always had the outlet that's given me a sense of purpose, because I think we need purpose and not just pills in life. But nowadays, I wanted to actually focus all my efforts in fundraising, and charity to try and help people to actually benefit to actually find the same actually benefits of the outdoors, and just to give people hope, that they can find a way through as well, because it can be incredibly challenging, and there are so many people my age, especially, who are suffering with it. And I just want to hope, show people what they can do.
Yeah, that is amazing and very admirable from you. It's quite real. It's not, and it's age agnostic. It's not just about the young people. It's about all ages. People are struggling, and I think the outdoors can be cheap because you just walk out a few kilometers from your house and you breathe in the air, you relax. It does have that effect on people. So you've just completed what I read about. I mean, you've told me about this as well, the 3-peak challenge. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What does it entail? How did you prepare for it? As much detail as you care to share.
Sure. So where to start, really? I mean, in the UK, there is quite a common challenge called the National 3 Peaks, where you climb the highest mountains in the UK, Ben Nevis in Scotland, Scafell Pike in England, and Snowdon in Wales. And normally that challenge is done in under 24 hours, and you normally drive in between the 3 peaks. So that was the first challenge that I ever really did when I was about 16 years old. And at the time, that was my Everest. That was a massive, massive step for me because, I hated sport at school. I was never fit. I had anxiety and panic attacks. And that was a life-changing moment for me. So this year I decided to do things a bit differently. And I actually climbed the 3 mountains, but I ran the entire distance between the mountains. So there's no driving. And that was about 450 miles in total. And it took me 9.5 days. Obviously climbing the mountains and then running up to 50 miles a day non-stop. So that was completed about 2 weeks ago. And that was, again, all fundraising for mental health. And it was probably the most challenging and most daunting, goal I'd ever really set myself. And I still can't quite believe I've done it, to be honest. But my legs and my knees, they believe I've done it. They're still not very happy with me.
I know that before the climb, we were planning to talk, you and I, and you moved the climb because you had injured yourself during training.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that, and how did it affect your run?
Sure. So this challenge, the idea came to me last year, and it's almost been my focus for the whole of this year. And I think especially after COVID, it's the only thing that hasn't been cancelled. It obviously got delayed because of lockdown. It was meant to happen in May, but that just gave me more time to train and prepare. All the training really was just about getting a lot of miles in my legs. I was running most days. On weekends, I'd be running, long miles in the hills, sometimes up to, 30 miles. I'd be running, quite a few marathons. That became quite normal. And just getting my legs as strong as possible, really. But then a week before I was due to finally start the challenge after lockdown and after so many setbacks, I sprained my ankle on a run, literally just a week before. So obviously I realized I had to wait, and I waited a week, and then the ankle still wasn't right. And then I waited another week, and I realized that it was almost, if I didn't go now, then it wasn't going to happen. And I think fear and anxiety can be quite crippling, and the more we think about it, the worse it becomes. And I was almost starting to actually, imagine this, this pain when my physiotherapist had already said, it's good to go. I had 2 weeks, and it was just hellish of just wanting to start and losing the motivation after all this time and focus and preparation. So I decided just to start and go for it. And I'd never been so doubtful. I'd never been so scared for a challenge before this one. But luckily, giving myself the extra time was a good idea. But I'm very glad I started when I did, because the ankle was fine. And as I found with an ultramarathon challenge like that, when you're running, day after day, I was faced with much bigger challenges, more injuries, more setbacks, and the ankle actually became pretty insignificant. So I think really it was just about, being patient, but keeping momentum was key for that.
Fantastic. What were you aiming for, and what did you actually achieve in terms of distance, time, and how many rest hours did you have per day? What was your strategy in general?
I mean, I guess this challenge was, I split success into 3 different ways. So the first one was to actually complete the run, to complete the concept of running in between the 3 peaks. Secondly was to actually beat the current best time. The current, actually fastest record was 9 days, 11 hours and 39 minutes. And I wanted to beat that time. Not by a massive margin, even 10 minutes would have been fine. And I think most importantly, the third aspect, it was fundraising £10,000 for Mind Over Mountains, which is our charity for, which is restoring mental health through the outdoors. So I guess that was my 3 objectives. And I was just glad to get there, really, after the setbacks. But each day, I had a rough schedule and a rough itinerary where, I'd be starting early, about 6 in the morning, and generally finishing sort of by 9 or 10. I had originally wanted to finish early so that I could get a good meal, I could get time to recover and sleep. But as I found on all my challenges, that just doesn't happen. Things take longer than we planned, things get held up. And I think really my strategy in the end just became to keep on moving forwards. I had this mantra, which is just, it's relentless forward, emotion.
Yeah.
Just relentless forward motion, keep moving forwards. And quickly after day 2, when I hit the tarmac roads, my feet were getting absolutely trashed. And there was days when I couldn't I couldn't run more than 10 meters because the pain in my shins and ankles were so bad. There was another day when I actually fell down some stairs in a hotel, and then I strained a tendon in the back of my leg. And then I could only walk for the day. I guess really in the end, I was trying to, sort of finish by darkness. I was running from kind of dawn to dusk every day, a lot of walking, but trying to keep on moving forwards as much as I could. And then you just get into this routine really of just getting up early and walking and running and walking and running. But it was very slow. I wasn't running fast. It's just about trying to keep the intensity as low as possible. But every day was different. You just have to adapt and overcome as you go along.
Yeah, I love that. I say keep stepping. I suppose nobody has ever won by stopping. You have to get to the finish line. And I think movement is important. You're absolutely right. You have wisdom beyond your age, I must say. So Mind Over Mountains, that is, first of all, it's an interesting naming convention. Tell us a little bit more about that charity. What does it do? I know you founded it. How can people get involved, and what is it about?
Sure. So it kind of came about from an event 2 years ago where I was invited to be, an ambassador type figure. A company called Adventure Uncovered were doing this event to advertise the benefits of hill walking for mental health. And we did this event in the mountains where I kind of thought, let's make this more than just, a weekend of walking in the mountains. Let's add in some of the kind of well-being aspects. And since the early days of my Everest journey, when I was about 16, I met my first mentor, Chris. And, he's a qualified coach. He's fantastic at bringing out people's potential and overcoming, self-limiting beliefs. And that for me is actually, I think, is equally important in mental health as well. It can stop us feeling bad about ourselves and give us that confidence we need. So I brought in Chris and I thought, what if we combine, the guided hill walking with a bit of coaching and some mindfulness and, inspirational speakers, because that's kind of become my day job. And I thought, what if we can bring in some people who can talk about, how they've overcome their mental health to achieve great things in the outdoors, and then just kind of fusing these things together. And we did that, and it was a great success. I was just really inspired by how you can create this kind of like-minded confidential space where people walk and talk. So we did it again, and then we realized just the benefit it was having on people. So we wanted to make it more of a charity. Me and Chris, I've kind of, we were kind of the co-founders and directors. So it's been great to go on that journey together. And we actually got registration as a charity a few weeks ago. And we've been doing more events around the UK to try and make the outdoors accessible and give people those self-help skills. We're not saying that you can go on a walk and be cured and be fixed, but I think as part of a lifestyle, being outside is a fantastic way to build that kind of mental resilience to stay well.
Fantastic. Somebody, Mitzi, hi, how are you? I hope you are enjoying this. So she's just quoted you to say, golden nuggets, we need purpose, not just pills. That is amazing. That's quite profound.
Thank you.
And we're not saying stop taking your pills. We're saying you actually would benefit more from going outside. So how do you prepare mentally? I mean, I know through my journey, and I've noticed how important mental preparation is, not just physical preparation. How do you combine the two? How do you get the right mix? And what do you do to prepare yourself mentally for an Everest climb, as an example, or a 3-peak challenge that you've just come back from?
I guess it really depends on the individual challenge. For Everest, that was almost my life goal, my life purpose, which sounds silly at a young age. But when I had that goal, I had this vision, I had this feeling that Everest gave me of standing on top of the world that I just couldn't get anywhere else. And I could feel that vision, I could feel that moment, and that was strong enough to drive me. You know, that was my mental prep, was keeping that end goal in mind. I never experienced anything prior to that, so I couldn't. I mean, obviously, apart from my training climbs, you know, I knew I had to take the steps to have the confidence that I was capable, that my body could cope at altitude. That's why I climbed in the Alps, I climbed in the Himalayas beforehand. So that's the physical and the kind of technical preparation. But mentally, you know, it was hard to imagine something that I hadn't experienced before. So I think the first time round, I mean, I was only 18, so I didn't have that kind of experience of, you know, of breaking things down into sort of small steps. But on the second trip and on my other trips, it was just about being able to take it one day at a time, you know, not thinking too far ahead. And I guess that was the only mental strategy that I really had, was about, you know, what's happening now or happening today doesn't always affect what's going to happen tomorrow or a week later. And I think, as you know yourself, on these expeditions, a lot can change very, very quickly. So it's about being able to, you know, be very laid back and just to focus in the moment and what can you control in that moment. I learned an awful lot about that on Everest. You know, I definitely didn't have the strongest mental strategy going into the climb as I should have done. On the recent trips, you know, and the recent climbs and, you know, and things I've done, I think, again, every time I've tried to have kind of, you know, a rigid plan or strategy, it's always ended up changing. And I think that's why being flexible is probably the most important part of my strategy, because if you're too fixed, you know, on something, if you're too fixed on things going a certain way, but you've not actually done something quite like that before, you can almost, I think you can set yourself on the wrong foot, because when things go wrong, when things, you know, don't go to plan, you can just lose your mind, you know, you can just lose your head, you can lose your focus. So I think, again, I go into it with a very open mindset of just get the first day done, you know, break it down into those sort of small stages, is really important to me. And on the Three Peaks run, it was different, because it was hard to stay focused, because the challenge kept being pushed back and pushed back, you know, and my kind of mental psyche, that kind of excitement that you might feel before a trip, I'd just been dragged out for so long that I was really just wasn't feeling normal. And that was creating all these doubts. So with that challenge, I made the mistake that I didn't really imagine the finish. I didn't really have this kind of vision of what success would look like, because I was so doubtful of making it. And I know that's quite negative, but I was so doubtful of making it. I didn't want to disappoint myself. So I was just focused on, I just kept running. And it sounds like Forrest Gump, but I just kept running and running and tried to get to the end of that day. But when I'm actually on these runs, you know, when I'm on marathons, it really is about small stages. So, for example, rather than thinking I've got 50 miles to run, I think, okay, if I listen to like, so one more song, by that point I've run a mile. Then in 2 miles I can have a snack, and then when I reach 5K I can stop for a drink, or I can, you know, change a song on my phone. And you're almost just making these little milestones, and I think that stops it feeling like this massive number. So I think that's the key for me, really. So small steps.
Yeah, fantastic. That we can use even in life and every day. Very good advice, especially now with COVID happening. You know, it's just doing your bit one step at a time. So much uncertainty as we move along. You are one of the few people that was on Everest in both 2014 and 2015. I would like to actually hear from you, your experience. I mean, 2014, it's the first time that you're on the mountain. I'm sure excited, probably like me, with romantic ideas about what Everest is all about and how success is a given. And on the 18th of April, the Sirac happens and 16 shepherds die. Where were you and what was going through your mind? How did you recover from that and go back the next year?
Yeah, I guess we're in quite an exclusive club. Being there for the kind of two, biggest, Everest disasters in history is quite something. I mean, at the time, again, I was naive enough to think that, if you work hard enough, success is almost guaranteed. What could possibly go wrong now? And we we were trekking into base camp. You know, we were just one day away when the avalanche happened. You know, and as you say, you know, 16 people sadly died, and we got to base camp a day later, and obviously there was this horrible, very dark feeling. You know, there was all this mourning, and of course, you know, there's been a massive tragedy, and it was, yeah, not a nice place to be. And obviously things then kind of got quite out of hand, and we realized we had no option but to go home after a week of just waiting without actually stepping foot on the mountain. So I guess there was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of kind of bitterness of, you know, at first you become quite emotional and reactive, thinking, you know, this isn't meant to happen, you know, why me? But then you quickly get kind of that sense of perspective that, you know, I'm lucky to be going home safe, and you know, actually the mountain doesn't give a damn how hard you've worked, how much you've raised, how much you've spent, how hard you've trained. And so you have two choices. You know, you can use it to grow, or you can just sit there and complain about it. So it's like, okay, what can I do now? How can I use this time to come back stronger and have a second attempt? And actually, in hindsight, I was very, very grateful that I had a second attempt, you know, and I think it teaches you a lot more. Yeah, it felt unlucky, but actually you just turn it the other way around.
Yeah. And 2015, when you went back, how was that any different? What did you pick up from 2014 that you used in 2015? And tell us a little bit more about that.
I think in the following year, I went back with a better mindset. You know, I'd done more training and more endurance, and I'd realized actually how fitness does very little for you at altitude. You know, it really is about the mindset. So I went into it with a much bigger appreciation and respect for how uncertain things are, how little we actually control, and being able to know that even if I'm feeling really bad down here at this altitude, that doesn't mean I'm going to be the same in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. Just being able to enjoy the journey, you know, and not panicking when things aren't going to plan. But then what happened next, obviously with it, you know, with the Nepal earthquake, I hadn't been prepared for that. I don't think anybody could have been prepared for that. And we started to climb on the mountain. We were going up to Camp 1 when the earthquake hit Nepal. And our team, you know, we're just below Camp 1. Some of them had already reached Camp 1. We got hit by a big blast of powder. You know, 19 years old, for the first time, I was thinking, you know, this is it, game over. And luckily, you know, we escaped unharmed. We were trapped at Camp 1 for 2 days, but sadly, 3 of our team at base camp, you know, hadn't been so lucky. And well, had we not left base camp that morning, I probably wouldn't be speaking to you now. So I think, yeah, 2015 couldn't have gone much worse, apart from the fact that we got to go home safe. But that was a life-changing experience in more ways than one, really.
Yeah. What team were you in? So you were on the side of Pumori, of base camp. Yeah, that's the side that was hit quite badly. Who were you climbing with at the time?
So both years I was on the team led by Tim Mosdale. Tim was with the Himalayan Guides kind of, you know, umbrella. So yeah, I mean, I kind of started climbing with Tim. You know, I'd almost been mentored by him to jump the hoops, to you know, to get the experience I needed to be competent on the hill. So yeah, I was with Tim, and Henry Todd was our base camp manager. So we had some, you know, some of the strongest Sherpas on the hill as well. Yeah.
And I see after that you came back and you are an author. You've written 2 books. Another Peak and Icefall. Yeah. Oh, unfortunately, I have them on the iPad. Just put them up for everybody to see, please, if you can.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Those are quite big books for somebody in the 20s, early 20s. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about those books, and where can people get a copy, and what can they expect to get from those books? Yeah,
I mean, I never imagined I'd be writing a book Icefall was my first when I was 19. And actually, that is the opening line of the book. It is about age and everything. I guess I'd always wanted to write a book about Everest and about the journey. And actually, because of what happened, I had probably a different story to tell, because there's lots of books out there about climbing Everest and reaching the top and waving the flag, you know, but actually the 2 disasters is probably quite a different tale of events. So Icefall was all about my journey from school to the epilepsy, the early challenges, to Everest. Both times I shared both the expeditions and just the whole experiences of the avalanches. And yeah, so that's came out 4 years ago now. Very excited. It was endorsed by Bear Grylls, who's been a big inspiration of mine. And yeah, my last book, Another Peak, came out last year, and that was basically talking about everything after Everest. And it's a lot more open about on the mental health struggles, but also I did a challenge 3 years ago called Climb the UK, which basically it was all in the UK, and it involved you climbing the highest points of all the 100 counties or regions. So that was a 5,000-mile cycle, walk and run and kayak around the UK. And that book shares that challenge, but also just trying to understand the kind of mental health benefits of the outdoors. And I'm now working on my third book, so keeping busy. Yeah, also both books are available on my website and Amazon and Kindle as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. In some of your talks and on some of your posts that you've put up, you've also mentioned today, you talk about resilience. What does it mean to you? And why is it important, especially now with what's happening around the world? Why is resilience so important? And what is your definition of resilience? Is it something that people are born with? Is it something that people are born with, or they can learn it from other people? Go ahead.
It's a big kind of buzzword, isn't it? Resilience, and it is interesting. I think I don't think we're born with it, but I think it's the result of our experiences and how we respond to them. And it is something that we can build through experiences. I think some of us are more naturally resilient due to the sort of challenges we've been exposed to. Maybe from a young age, if we've had challenges when we were a child, for example. But to me, I think resilience, I used to think, is about being able to bounce back. It's about being able to be tough and keep on going. But I think I've learned a lot about it recently, that I think it's more about how we keep moving forwards. And sometimes being able to keep moving forwards is about being able to take a step back and ask for help. I think especially in mental health in particular, I think having these experiences in life when you've been, out in the elements, you've been mentally tired, physically tired, you're exhausted, you're out of your comfort zone. I think it's those experiences where we build resilience, where we have to use our resources to find a way through. But equally, it's asking for help if we need it. And I think having those challenges in life, I think it makes us more resilient to life stresses. Something that a few years ago may have annoyed me or upset me or bothered me, nowadays I'm just like, because that threshold is a lot higher. But it doesn't make you invincible. We can still have our struggles and our bad days, no matter how resilient we may seem. So I think in this current kind of climate, it's more about being able to keep on moving forwards and not necessarily bouncing back, but about being able to adapt. Being able to make the best of what we have and use that in a resourceful way. And yeah, I think part of strength is about having that human connection around us as well. So it is very interesting, but the world isn't going to be the same. So why do we want to bounce back? We need to be able to actually move forwards and control whatever that may be.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that you say that. It's very relevant to the status quo, because if you think about it, we keep talking about the new normal. What is that? What are the parallels between the new normal and what you also talk about in terms of redefining success? Do you see any?
Possibly. I think in motivational speaking, I talk about, how to kind of redefine success and failure, because actually what happened on Everest really beat my fear of failure, because I realized that sometimes failure is inevitable. Things happen outside of our control. This year, everything has been outside of our, almost everything has been outside of our circle of influence and control. We've not, we didn't choose COVID, but we've got no choice but to confront it and just make the best of it how we can. And I think that's why, for me, success has become about the process, not the outcome, because so much of the outcome is out of our control. And so I think at the moment, this new normal is interesting, because I think, to me, success is about it's what we do with the things inside of our influence, and how we can bounce back from those. Well, I shouldn't say bounce back, but it's about how we adapt and how we recover from those setbacks, how we pick ourselves back up again, is what defines our success. And so the new normal really, I think, is about how we respond to the things inside of our, in our control. Because if we're always focused on the top of the mountain, we're never quite going to get there.
No.
So in a long-winded way, I think it really is about, how we come back, and how we deal with those setbacks. That is what matters.
But more importantly, moving forward, irrespective.
Moving forwards, yeah. And sometimes it's knowing when to take a step back to be able to take a step forward.
Yeah. So when I look at your journey, as it is, you've got ultra marathon, you've done a bit of climbing, and you've got these UK challenges. How do they differ in your mind? When do you do what, and when do you do what? Are you using one to train for another, or do you just love doing all of them? And which is your favorite?
I think for me, it started in the mountains. I used to enjoy walking up the mountains and climbing, and I think everything really was focused on Everest. So I was using cycling and running to train for Everest, and obviously climbing in the Alps and and the Himalayas and in the UK, not so much for fun, but as a necessary step to be able to climb Everest. I did love being in the mountains, but it was more of it was what I needed to do. Aside from that, though, I mean, just in general, on a day-to-day basis, being active and cycling and running is really important to me. I need to have that regular release, that escape. I'm training most days in some way or another. If I don't get out and run or something, then my mental health suffers. It's just a really essential part of my everyday life. But I guess since Everest, I mean, I've kind of moved away from the high mountains, and I love the Himalayas. I love being in Nepal, but I would definitely not call myself, a climber or mountaineer. It was more that was just where I found my challenges. Since then, I've kind of started to look at doing doing those challenges more close to home. And again, combining being in the mountains with running and endurance sports. I'm definitely more of an endurance athlete. I think running has been probably my strongest sport, probably the one that I enjoy the most. And I've used that both as a goal. I've entered marathons. I've had certain, kind of goals in mind for times or races. But as well as that, as well as training, it is just a really important part of my day-to-day life. And my last challenge was, it naturally was a way to combine that love of running with actually doing it as my big challenge. So it's just a very important part of my life. And nowadays, doing these big challenges and trying to break records and do massively daft ideas, it kind of underpins everything that I do, both in the speaking, in the writing, and in the fundraising. So it all ties together quite nicely. But I guess really it's just about finding challenge in any way that I can.
Yeah. So of all the climbs, the ultra running, and the challenges that you've been able to participate in, which has been your most memorable, and why?
I think, for obvious reasons, Everest 2015 was very traumatic and very memorable in that sense. But again, they're all so different that it would be unfair to compare them. Our expedition, probably on Choa-Yu in Tibet in 2016, was actually one of the most memorable expeditions, because we had the right team. We were in an amazing place. We got to experience being up at 7,000 meters. The whole experience was as an adventure should be. It had all the right components. And you're there for sort of 6 weeks, so you've got time to take the experience in. The Three Peaks run I did recently, it was over in 9 days. I didn't really get a chance to settle into the mindset. I just was in this blur of just running and running. But I would say that the Three Peaks run is to me feels like my biggest achievement, people think obviously Everest is the highest mountain, and of course I didn't reach the top. Even to actually get to Everest is a challenge itself, as you know. But I'm probably most proud of the Three Peaks run, just for the ability to overcome the setbacks that I did and the doubts that I had and others had. And I think that's the one I'm most proud of. But being in the Himalayas is just magical, and it's very hard to forget.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people have different and varied limiting beliefs. Overcoming those is always memorable and a triumph in more ways than one. How do you choose your challenges? And I see you've done a couple. How do you decide the Three Peak challenge, this is what we're doing, and we're doing it for mental health? How do you come about that? Is there a process?
I think with all my challenges and expeditions, it's always been for a charity, because that just feels right to use it as a platform for good. Doing it for Mind Over Mountains and mental health has been a new thing, because I wanted to, support something where I can see the difference being made. But I've kind of always needed to have a big project, a big challenge. That's just me, for me, it's the challenges that make life worthwhile. And so for a long time, it was just Everest. Everest was the ultimate. And I've had to reinvent myself and realize actually there was life without Everest. And I've been able to find that same challenge in many different ways, which has been great. So I think after Everest, I almost had this criteria, and that criteria always changed. But Choa Yu was more of a training climb with the idea of going back to Everest, which obviously didn't happen. I realized it just wasn't for me. It wasn't about trying to quit. It was more about realizing that actually I'd taken a different journey. This wasn't about the top anymore. And then I guess my criteria was, okay, I want to do something in the UK. I want to do something combining running and mountains, and cycling. And I want something different. I'm not interested in doing something that's been, done many times before. And I know Everest has, but since Everest, it's been about looking for things that are very unique, very different, that people hadn't done. Because I've always been very unconventional. At school, I never wanted to fit in. And I like going into the unknown. I like having to figure that out for myself, and not having a lot of examples to follow. So when I have that kind of criteria, the process is more about looking online. I look at what other people have done. I look at records. I read books. I'm almost just consciously looking for something, and it could take months, or weeks before I kind of get an idea and think, that's it. With Everest, I had the goosebumps. I had that kind of passionate feeling, and it's almost like an entrepreneurial process, because you're almost trying to create an idea. And sometimes I think of something, I think, well, maybe that's too far, maybe it's too short, maybe it's not hard enough, maybe it's too hard. And eventually you just feel it. I think that's it. That's the challenge. There's a very careful balance between fear of, is this actually possible? And and excitement, and with this last challenge, it was just, I realized that I hadn't done anything big for a long time. I had, personal challenges and other focuses and priorities. And yeah, I look around, and then there's a bit of research. Sometimes you think you've got an idea, and then you find that somebody else has done it, or someone else has done it faster, or something else. And I really enjoy that process, but it can be quite frustrating. It can be quite mentally hard, because you have this excitement and this kind of frustration and disappointment. But when I commit to an idea, when I put it in the public domain, I have the accountability. And I think when I commit to myself, there's no going back. I've got to make it happen. And I guess now my challenge after this one is going to be finding another challenge.
We look forward to that. How has COVID-19 affected you and your plans, or has it at all?
Of course, I think everybody has been affected by COVID, and it's been a different mountain to climb. I think I felt very fortunate compared to some, being self-employed as a speaker. Okay, most of the speaking events around the world have been cancelled, or they've gone virtual. So I'm doing a lot of virtual speaking now for clients. But I was able to be flexible. I had lots of stuff to be doing, with the charity, with the challenge. I had focus because, as I mentioned before, I think not having a purpose, not having something to work towards in life, not having something to kind of be excited by, or just to kind of get out of bed for in the morning, is quite a difficult and hopeless place to be. So I felt lucky that, even if I wasn't having the same work, I had lots of projects to obviously work on. I could just change the order around. I had to be realistic. I had to kind of go back to my goals for the year and say, okay, well, that's not going to happen, but what can I do? And I think running, again, was my focus. I mean, we were very fortunate here in the UK in lockdown that we could still exercise outside. And that was my savior. Had we not been able to do that, COVID would have been a very, very different experience to me. But I guess I go into my default mindset, which is, okay, what can I do to make a difference with this time? So that after COVID, I can look back at what I did and what I was proud of. So I guess it's affected me as a speaker, as I'm sure all of us, it's affected me from an income point of view, but, I'm very healthy. My family were healthy. I'm an introvert, so I really enjoyed the quiet time. And it was just about accepting it. Like anything, it's a challenge. It's a mountain. We're going to get there eventually. We've just got to support each other and look at what we can do and not be frustrated by that.
Yeah, that's true. And just going back to your challenges, whether it's ultra running or mountaineering or cycling, are there any 3 items that you always take with you, whether it's on an expedition or in a run, that you religiously take these 3 things?
I think it depends again on the challenge, on what I'd be doing. But I think there's one thing that I'd always have with me on any outdoor pursuit, is my phone, because I think from a safety point of view, I like the reassurance, but I think music is really important to me, and it helps me to process things. It helps me to get in the right mindset. It creates that kind of drive, that motivation sometimes, on long runs and on expeditions and things. Being able just to put my headphones in and play music on my phone, it's really important to me, I think. So I think my phone and music is always one. I guess, you'd have different kit for the various challenges. I'm quite basic. I'm not too fussed about the home comforts, but I guess I'm trying to think really. I mean, on one of my challenges, I didn't bring a very good waterproof coat. So I spent a lot of time very cold and very miserable. So I think just having good quality kit that you can rely on and be comfortable. I think that's the best thing I can think of at the moment in time is music and my phone, and maybe a few home comforts, a few kind of favorite kind of snacks or treats when you're in the Himalayas, you're away from home, can go a very long way.
Yeah. As you talked about the kit, I remembered taking a different type of down suit. And at Camp 2, everybody in the tent was warm except me. I was shivering. I went back to Everest Base Camp and I ordered a new down suit. So I think a comfortable suit, comfortable boots can cost you an expedition. So those are
I think as well, like at base camp especially, having a down jacket for when the sun goes down and the temperature plummets, just you feel very reassured when you've got a down jacket just to put that on. And I think as well, it's I think when I did my challenge 3 years ago, having kind of a little mini tent in my on the back of the bike was a real reassurance that if I didn't make it to my hotel or hostel, I always had a tent. I always had that safety. And I think having that is very reassuring.
Yeah, backup plan. Let me not go to my questions. What's that picture behind you? Is that you standing somewhere? Where is?
Yeah, that's me. In 2014, I'm on the highest point of Switzerland, the Dom de Mischabel. So that's one of the few mountains I actually have reached the top of. That was about 4,500 meters. So I'm just holding a flag, as you can see. And it's a gorgeous mountain. I mean, me and the guy James had it all to ourselves. It was just such a special experience, you know, with a massive drop on one side. And it was how mountaineering should be, you know, good company, good weather, a good peak, and just that proper feeling of adventure. So I'd love to go back and do that, actually.
Amazing, very beautiful. What can we expect from you? What's next? I mean, you talked about maybe figuring out the next challenge. Is there something that you have in mind already that you can share, or not yet?
I think it's really important, I've realized, not to always be chasing the next goal, because we don't process what we've done. And you know, this last one, the achievement that kind of hasn't really sunk in yet. You know, it all feels a bit surreal still. And it's only 2 weeks ago, and my body's still recovering. I think it will take quite a few weeks to get back to normal, just to get the motivation back, to get my knees and tendons back to normal. And I'm quite enjoying not having that pressure to train, you know, just to go outside when I feel like it. So I think I won't be doing any big challenges this year, but I know I'll get the bug again maybe next year to really think about, okay, what is possible? Because after I've overcome these doubts, I'm quite liberated to see what else I could do.
Yeah.
So for challenges, I think I'll be doing more running, you know, more like ultra running challenges. Although on the Free Peaks, I actually missed the best time by about an hour. So I may, you know, attempt that again. I'm not sure. But I think Mine Over Mountains as a charity, you know, we've got a lot happening, and that's been exciting. It's been inspiring. There's a lot of work to do there. I need to, you know, adapt all my speaking in the virtual world. I think that's here to stay for a while. So I'm trying to share what I've learned in a virtual environment. So there's a lot of speaking events coming up, and I'm just trying to put that out there. So I think, yeah, now it's getting back to some normality again, and trying to find a new focus. But eventually, if I have time, getting a third book finished. So yeah, lots happening, really. Keep tuned.
Yeah, interesting. What advice? I mean, I listened to your story, epileptic, bullied at school. Are you still epileptic, or have
No,
you?
I was quite lucky. I mean, it was only very mild. When I was, you know, 8 or 9, I just had a handful of seizures, but I've not been on medication for probably 15 years nearly. So I don't see that as a problem now.
Okay. So what advice would you give a younger self? I mean, you are still young, so I don't know if this is a fair question or not. Knowing what you know today, is there something that you would have loved to tell your younger self, that maybe somebody watching, whether right now or in the future, because this is going to be on YouTube, would pick a nugget from you in terms of that?
When I look back at those bullies now and all those things that used to annoy and upset me, you know, you realize actually nobody can make you feel anything, you know, unless you give them that permit to do so. Actually, the biggest barrier really is ourselves and what we believe about ourselves. And, you know, we are capable of so much more than we realize. But again, it's overcoming those personal barriers. And if we let people tell us what we can and can't do and how good or bad we are, then we're only going to, you know, follow that conventional path. And that's just a very tragic loss of our potential. So I think it's just, I've said a few things there. It's just to realize that the biggest barrier is ourselves, and not to let anybody make you feel anything.
Yeah, that is good advice. I mean, that's advice that not just your younger self, even myself and other people watching right now, or in the future that might even be older than you, should take. You know, I think we are our own barriers before we look elsewhere. Alex, it's been amazing. It's been epic chatting to you, and thank you for making time. If there's anything that you would like to maybe close with, please go ahead and give us a little bit more wisdom, and maybe talk about the books that you just shared now, and where people can get hold of them. Do you have the title for the new book that you're working on yet?
I don't have a title yet. I've not got much more than the first few chapters. So at the moment, I mean, when I get my kind of, you know, my energy back from the challenge, I'll be thinking more about that. But if people do want to read more about my story, my journey so far, my books obviously have all the details. So again, if people head over to my website, they can find me on social media. If anybody has any more, any more ideas or questions, please feel free to email me. I'm always happy to try and help and answer, anything I can. So, I'd love to hear from you. And I think if I can end on any wisdom, it would be, what's your Everest? What could that challenge be?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I am going to put a link onto the platform after this, and people can follow on. And follow, this is a young man to watch. I know he says that Everest is not for him right now. I wonder. Never say never. You're still too young, Alex. But thank you. And God bless. Metsi says, great conversation, a hero's journey. Thank you for watching and your support always, Metsi. And Alex, have a good one.
And you, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.